started. So welcome to Don't Just Click Next, Increase Instructional Interactivity Instead. Sacha, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure, thank you, Irene. So thank you again for joining me for my session, which is Don't Just Click Next, Increase Instructional Interactivity Instead. So just a little bit about me. My name is Sacha Johnson, and I'm a senior instructional designer at Idaho State University, and I'm part of the Instructional Technology Resource Center, or ITRC, that includes a team of instructional designers who are available to support faculty across campus with hybrid and online teaching using educational technologies, mainly our learning management system, which is Moodle. I came to the ITRC in 2018, and that's when I really started working with the Quality Matters rubric and immediately recognized the value of having quality online standards for courses, having quality standards for online courses. And I consider myself incredibly fortunate to get to work with faculty who participate in ISU's implementation of the Quality Matters rubric, because I get to work one-on-one with many instructors as they design and develop their courses to meet the standards. And I enjoy brainstorming and empowering faculty to create authentic and meaningful online instruction that fosters student learning. So that leads me to a critical piece of quality online courses and my topic today, which is about creating meaningful learner content interaction. So whether you are faculty or instructional designers, what I'd like for you to be able to take away from today's session is the ability to define instructional interactivity, as well as be able to identify some ways that you can add instructional interactivity to online courses and subsequently improve their quality. So these outcomes directly correlate with the Quality Matters specific review standards 5.2 and 6.2. That learning activities provide opportunities for interaction that support active learning, namely learner to content interactions for today's session, and that the course tools promote engagement and active learning. Again, I'm talking today about the interaction and engagement with the course instructional materials. So I am going to ask you to participate in this session using the Zoom annotation tools, and I'm sure we're all familiar with Zoom and probably have a bit of Zoom fatigue at this point, but just in case, we'll take a minute just to find them. So while viewing a shared screen, you should have an option for view options, and you can choose annotate from that menu. And then you can use the draw tool to insert lines, arrows, and shapes, or you can insert predefined shapes using the stamp tool. So now I would like to get to know a little bit more about you and what your role is at your institution. We've got somebody who said they're an instructional designer. Is that the case? So yeah, I'd like to see what role you have. It looks like people are finding the annotation tool, so that is great. Let me find my tool so I can clear it when we're done. So yeah, it looks like we have a lot of faculty and administration and instructional designers. So it looks like we have a pretty good mix. It looks like some are still coming in, so I'll let it keep going. Senior instructional technologist, that's a good one. Here at Idaho State, we kind of use designer to mean both, because it was instructional technologist for a long time here, and then we recently changed to instructional designer. Although I do know there are differences. There are some nuanced differences. But it looks like everyone is kind of slowing down. So I really appreciate you sharing. This gives me an idea of who you are and what your role is at your institutions. And hopefully I can kind of make sure to provide some key takeaways accordingly. So I've been talking about, I'm annotating, sorry. I've been talking about instructional interactivity and active learning, but what's the difference, or is there really a difference? So looking at the annotations for specific review standard 5.2, active learning, involves learners engaging by doing something such as discovering, processing, or applying concepts and information. And in the book, Effective Online Teaching, Foundations and Strategies for Student Success, Stavridis, and I hope I'm pronouncing that even close to correctly, defines active learning as requiring learners to reflect on what they know as they actively engage in readings, writing, and dialogue to make meaning from the content and construct knowledge. Instructional interactivity is a definition I got from Michael Allen's Guide to E-Learning, Building Interactive, Fun, and Effective Learning Programs for Any Company. And he defines it as interaction that actively stimulates the learner's mind to do those things that improve ability and readiness to perform effectively. So it's clear that active learning and instructional interactivity are similar and that they both entail engaging learners with the content to create knowledge or skills. So whether we look at this as active learning or instructional interactivity, the key here is going to be designing meaningful interactions that support the achievement of the student learning outcomes. So some common misconceptions that come along with instructional interactivity, according to Allen, are first, presentation. So merely presenting material is not considered instructional interactivity. For example, in online courses, it's easy for learners to passively read or watch lectures. In fact, it's possible for students to passively attend synchronous online lectures too, or in-person lectures. So we can't just present the material and expect learning to happen. Navigation is also something that can be passive, whether students are navigating around web pages or web courses. This kind of harkens back to the days when e-learning was pretty limited and consisted of those page turner activities, sort of where it was just easy for learners to mindlessly click next to continue without actually attending to the material. And a third misconception is that of EPSSs, and these typically apply in business settings. What EPSS stands for is Electronic Performance Support Systems. So these are programs that provide employees with on-demand instructions and pathways through troubleshooting based on their input rather than on their training or having specific knowledge or skills. For example, if you call IT support and are answering their questions, an EPSS could guide the tech support agent through the troubleshooting questions based on your answers. Questioning can also be considered passive if it does not require cognitive engagement. So just asking questions is not enough. We have to be able to ask questions that stimulate the learners to think about what they're going over and provide them some feedback and guidance as well. So these are not instructional interactivity, according to Michael Allen, and clicking next to continue is not instructional interactivity unless you're trying to teach people how to navigate to the next screen. So how do we add instructional interactivity and promote active learning? Well, let's take a step back and talk about a couple types of assessment, formative and summative. And you may be familiar with these terms or you may not. So just to go over the basics, summative assessment can be thought of as assessment of learning, excuse me, which is looking at completed work. So summative assessments are often used as evidence for other levels of the assessment process, such as program assessment or institutional levels. And these are activities where the students are demonstrating their mastery of the learning outcomes. Formative assessment, on the other hand, can be thought of as assessment for learning. It involves looking at students' work during the process of learning and providing feedback. So these are the activities where students can practice with the content, but fail gracefully before they have to demonstrate mastery. So formative assessment can be thought of as a chef tasting the soup as he or she is cooking it and making adjustments on the fly based on the feedback that he or she is getting, basically how it tastes. Whereas the summative assessment would be when the guests taste the soup. So this is the finished product. So H5P, if you're not familiar with it, is one tool that's available to add formative assessment into our instruction and help ensure we're supporting learner content interactions and active learning for specific review standards 5.2 and 6.2. Learner content interaction, again, involves engaging students with the materials, which, as I mentioned, is more than just clicking buttons on the computer. Rather, it requires that cognitive engagement and reflection. So a little bit about H5P. It stands for HTML5 package. And there are three basic ways that you can incorporate it into your instruction. One way is that organizations can sign up for hosting services from H5P. And that way they can create, store, and share those interactive activities with a link. Canvas, Brightspace, Moodle, and Blackboard all have integrations with H5P that you can do with the Learning Tools Interoperability, or LTI, applications. excuse me. And lastly, users can also self-host H5P using something like Drupal, which is a open source web content management system, or through WordPress. And I heard this morning, I think it was Mark Lane in their presentation, mentioned that there is an H5P OER hub coming. So that's an exciting news too. Anyway, once you have your integration set up, then you can start creating and incorporating these meaningful learner content interactions in your online courses. So there are a lot of different types of H5P learning activities. So let's take some time and explore. I have I have a link I'm going to post in the chat. Copy that, or you can use the QR code here. And I want to just give you a few minutes to explore these specific types of H5P. So flashcards, mark the words, fill in the blanks, and image sequencing. So you can scan the QR code if you have a mobile device handy and want to do it that way, or you can use the link that I posted in the chat. And I'm going to start a timer and give you a few minutes to look that over. I need some Jeopardy music or something. Oh, and these were the types that I asked you to look at: flashcards, mark the words, fill in the blanks, and image sequencing. And I will open it up to questions if anyone has any questions too at this point.
Sacha, how well does this stuff work with, oh, Sheila Northrop here, sorry.
No problem.
How well does this stuff work with like screen readers and accessibility technologies?
That is a fantastic question. And I do have a resource that I can share with you on their accessibility, because they do have a webpage devoted to accessibility and which tools are accessible, which ones are not. And what those issues are and whether someone is working on them. I think that's the right link. Yes, so this page has some examples. Well, it has all of the content types, as well as whether or not they're accessible and if they're maintained by the core team. So certain ones probably are not maintained by the core team, but have someone else working on them. But you can look at this and see what accessibility concerns there might be, for sure, because that's a huge concern. Great question, Sheila. Can this be integrated into an LMS for free? That's a good question as well. So the integration with Moodle, I know because that is our learning management system, that we have H5P in our Moodle core, so it's included with the costs associated with just our maintaining Moodle, which we self-host on Amazon Web Servers. With Blackboard and Brightspace and Canvas, it should be an LTI. So I think the main cost is going to be the hosting. So if you have the hosting space, I would imagine that it would be included in that cost. Does that help? Is it Danica?
Yeah, that helps. I was just wondering if something your institution purchases, or you could just like how you can other tools that you can just kind of pull in for free.
Mm. Well, it is. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry, this is Jen. I was going to say I've hosted H5P on other like free sites, and as long as you have an embed code, you can embed it. I know in Canvas you can embed it just using the embed tool, and it works. The only issue you run there is if where you're hosting it ever has a problem, then that will break the link, or it'll break that code in your course. So I pulled it in without using the LTI integration, but I'd talk to your university to see if that's the best option or not.
Right. Yeah. And like I said, I'm not as familiar with Canvas, Brightspace, and Blackboard, just because that's not what we use. And we also are lucky at this university that we have administrators who are our learning management system administrators who handle all of that back end stuff. But as far as I know, you could use free solutions and then embed it. The only thing, well, one thing that I can say with Moodle is that because it's integrated, it can also pass grades back to the gradebook, but I wouldn't use it for high stakes stuff. But you can have activities marked complete once they receive a grade or once they've completed it. So that can be nice for faculty to keep track of student progress and whether or not they're taking advantage of all of the resources that are available in the course.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. We have about 30 seconds left. So, oh yes, Lumi is another one. I have faculty who love to use Lumi, and that was one of my ideas for an activity today, but I thought everyone would have to download it and not everyone would be interested in that. But I do have faculty who will build their interactive content using Lumi, and then they'll upload it to the Moodle site, to their Moodle course. Okay, so I think we're close enough here. I'm going to stop it, reset it. So coming back, now you can use the annotation tools to indicate which of these H5P content types that you looked at that you could see yourself using, or why you wouldn't use them. If you have any concerns about using them, you're welcome to put it in the chat or use the annotation tools to say which ones you liked and which ones you would use. And you're welcome to unmute yourself if you'd like, or raise your hand and unmute yourself. Everything, yeah. Does anyone have a specific example of why they would use something like mark the words that they'd want to share? Nothing? That's okay. I had an example of mark the words for things like, oh, medical terminology course, reviewing a transcript. Okay, so they could mark specific words on there. We've also had faculty who do phonemes and other linguistic stuff that they have students mark. You could do adjectives, adverbs if it was something in, K-12 or intro courses. And you can also use a text excerpt and have students mark specific words like main points in there. Music symbols is a good one. Image sequencing, I have seen that used with putting the phases of meiosis and mitosis in order. Parts of a sentence, main points, etc. Exactly. And then flashcards, of course, we're all pretty familiar with that, I think, because we used to have the physical ones, at least I did. So that can be used for identification and vocabulary exercises. The nice thing, I think, with the H5P is that it requires them to put something in and then check the answer so they can get that immediate feedback. Unfortunately, you can still game the system and they could just put in an asterisk or one letter on the keyboard and still get the answer. But the idea is to hopefully get them engaging with that content. So I will clear the drawings and I want to take a few more minutes and look at some more. These ones are drag and drop, single choice set, Cornell notes, and essay. And I'm not in the right window. Whoops, go back. So we'll start the timer. Hopefully 5 minutes is enough. Because these are some more of the advanced ones, especially the Cornell notes and the essays. Virtual tours of hospital spaces, especially with COVID. We actually had some search committees and one of our staff members here had created a virtual tour of our facilities. And so since we had some of our finalists attend through Zoom, we didn't have the opportunity to come down and give them the facility tour. And so what I did is I shared that virtual tour on Zoom with them to give them an idea of how our offices are laid out and where everything is and what we have down here. I say down here, I am in the basement of the library. And I'm open for more questions, or if anyone wants to unmute and discuss some of these options. I know we have a lot of administrators and faculty as well as instructional designers. So thinking about Bloom's taxonomy, which is one of more than just Bloom's taxonomy, but thinking of some of the action verbs and the levels of cognitive learning outcomes, these activities can be designed to go from lots to hots. So lower order to higher order, depending on how things are designed within the H5P.
So I have a question.
Yes, please, Kelly.
I use Moodle as well. When you embed them into course, and we have the LTI set up, I'm rather new at my job here and at my college, and I came from K-12 previously, so there were like a lot of similarities and differences. Have you experienced any issues when you copy a course into the new terms, as far as any of the LTI tools or any of the H5P tools having issues?
So if I remember correctly, we did have issues with the H5P plugin versus the LTI. And when the H5P went to Moodle Core, because now we actually have a content bank. So the content bank is for the course, and then that's where the H5Ps are created and then linked to activities or resources or to the main course page in Moodle. And since we've started doing it that way, I haven't seen that happen.
I just wanted to, yeah, I mean, so when the teachers created or the professors created, I just worry about the thought process once and done in the creation, and just wanted to anticipate that, if I promote this, I just want to tell them ahead of time, make sure I try to tell them, but, go in and check your stuff. Always.
Absolutely. Yeah. Every semester, right? Even mid-semester, someone at the university decides to change the link to a student support service website. It's maddening sometimes when things get changed like that. But something like this, there are a couple of ways that you can add it to the main course page or to those activities. You can do a link to the file or copy the file. And I think either way that you do that, it should automatically be restored with the new course. So again, there's also a couple of ways that they can create the new course. So if you've created a backup of the Moodle course and then you're restoring from that backup, you have to make sure that you're including the content bank with it, because that's where the content is going to be located. The H5P content will be located. And similarly, if you're importing course content from one course to the new one, you'll have to make sure that you check the box to import the content bank with it. And I think if you don't check that box, you won't even have the option of selecting the H5P activities. However, if they're embedded in a page or a book in Moodle or a quiz or something like that, you will still be able to select those. And that's where something could break, I think. So 9 seconds, I think that's pretty good. I'm going to stop it. And again, I'm just going to ask if you could see yourself using any of these H5Ps, the drag and drop, the single choice set, Cornell Notes, and essay. Cornell Notes, I think, is fairly new. And they always have new activities coming out, which is really nice. The drag and drop could be used to differentiate or classify examples, which is really nice. Again, you can get at the higher levels of Bloom's depending on what you're having them do. Oh, Paula asked, can we store these in the centralized content bank? So do you mean the site level content bank? Yes, you can. My only question is, and I believe we kind of tried to do some testing with this to see if faculty have access to that. And I think they do. So you could have, say, folders for specific programs or courses and things like that on the site level. And then anyone from that program could use the activity. But I would be a little bit hesitant just because I don't know of the permissions issues. So if they would have permission to say, delete someone else's content. that would be my only concern. Ooh, a few more than I expected chose Cornell notes. That's awesome. And maybe the essay, definitely single choice set. I know, again, depending on how these questions are written, you can get at the higher level of Bloom's. The Cornell notes, I think that is a fantastic way for students to get used to taking good notes, right? So that is a way to guide students through the note-taking process and could be used for any number of classes to get them thinking about the content that they're reading, that they're watching, and making sure that they're getting the most out of it. And then the essay question is a fun one because you can have students enter in a textual narrative and then get instant feedback on it with some AI tools, of course. So you have to provide the keywords and what you expect to find in their response. And that can be kind of difficult because you would have to anticipate every possible scenario that you would accept in that answer. But it could be a nice way for them to get some formative assessment on things like writing an introduction or writing a thesis statement, things like that. And let me clear those. Next, I've got a few more that I want to try. I'm pretty sure we'll have plenty of time. Course presentation, interactive video, branching scenario, and then you're also welcome to explore any other one that's available on that website. And we'll just take 5 more minutes. How do I keep? And you're welcome to ask questions about these types, about any other types. I may or may not know the answer. I know I have used the Agamotto option in medical laboratory science courses. So it's kind of you can use it as a microscope simulation tool. So it looks like you can kind of zoom into the slides. And what was really neat with the medical lab science program is even with their clinical rotations, there are certain specimens that the students wouldn't necessarily be exposed to. So things like anthrax or, as fun as it is, fertility testing, so semen samples. It's not like you can go into the in-person lab or in clinical rotations and say, okay, we need samples from everyone we can get here in class. So it's nice to be able to use these tools to get students to see some of the rare occurrences in labs, or to be able to control the results that they see so that you can get them thinking about the results and how to interpret them and then what the next steps to take should be. And I believe it was the Agamotto one. Double check. Yes, the Agamotto, you can create a sequence of images. So you could use that for layering map images. So I think their example on h5p.org is adding the rivers or adding the state lines to a map as you move the slider across. Another one that's kind of similar to that is juxtaposition. So you could have, say, an aerial photograph of an area before a certain event happened, whether it was a fire or a flood, and then you can have the students move the slider to see the difference. But it has to be contextualized, I will say that. It can't just be that presentation or that navigation. They have to have it contextualized and get them thinking about it and give them some feedback on their performance as well. So this is the question, Vanessa. How is the student work submitted or saved? So within Moodle, because it's part of core and it's an LTI, so the Learning Tools Interoperability, the grades, it does include a report of how the students answer if there is something for them to answer. So with something like the juxtaposition or the Agamotto, where it's just looking through a series of slides, there isn't really any grade per se or any right or wrong answer. It's just that they are interacting with it. But if there is something where they're required to submit something and check their answer, it will pass back points. Okay, so the course presentation can actually incorporate I think all of the different types of H5Ps within it. So you can have slides, but then you can also incorporate single choice sets or multiple choice sets or summary statements where students answer those questions, and then that report is stored within our Moodle database. And then within the gradebook, faculty can go in and look at that report and see if they answered 2 out of 3 correct or that kind of information. But again, I will stress that it should only be used for formative assessments, so low stakes practice activities, because there is the possibility that things don't get submitted correctly. And it's not that they aren't submitted correctly, but it might go back to the expectations for students on how to submit it. So they need that training with the technology. And I think our keynote speaker spoke to that this morning. And the one example I can think of is with interactive videos. So with the interactive video, you can pause it and require the learners to answer questions as they go through it. And then once they get to the end, there's a summary. And if they don't answer that and submit it, then none of their answers for the previous questions, none of it is saved at all in the report, unfortunately. Hopefully that helps. Yes, okay, thank you. And thank you, Vanessa, that's a great question. And I think we're probably good on that. So I'm gonna come back and see if anybody could see themselves using these: course presentation, interactive video, branching scenario, or other. And I know that branching scenario, I know Sheila mentioned the virtual tours. The branching scenario example that they have on the H5P website is a home healthcare visit. So it is walking the learner through going to someone's home and the steps that you should take and what you observe and things that you should do based on that. And I will say it does take a little bit of time to design, but it's reusable. So that's the other nice thing about the H5Ps is they are reusable. So it may take some of that upfront investment time, but once you have it, you get to use it again. A lot of people liked the course presentation. The interactive video is fun. We've had really good student feedback on that. The one thing that I will note again is the clear expectation, because students will say, I can't get past a certain point. Well, there is the option to force the learners to answer questions before they can navigate forward. And so if they don't realize that they have to answer the question, they can't move forward. And it disables the navigation completely. So there's no scrubbing back and forth. There's no rewind, which is unfortunate as well, because we all know that there is a benefit to being able to rewind and rewatch and slow down and speed up on videos. And I'll also mention that the interactive video, as well as the branching scenario, have that option for a choose your own adventure. So you can design the interactive video to be a branching activity. So if it was something like the home healthcare visit and you had video for some kind of repercussions that happened with a choice that you made while you were at that home healthcare visit, you could send students to that point in the video that would give them that scene. So that's kind of fun too. But again, it takes time. But these are activities that you can do with H5P to increase that active learning. And I can tell that not everyone has H5P, right? So what if H5P is not an option? So that's a great question. I want to say that H5P isn't the only option. So whether you're teaching online or in person or some combination of the two, you also have other tools, hopefully at your university or organization, that you can use, such as your learning management system. So I was going to give you about 3 or 4 minutes to reflect on some of the tools that you have available that you could use for these formative assessments to actively engage students with your instructional materials. And you can put them in the chat, or you can feel free to unmute yourself, and I'll just give you a few minutes to think about that. Ooh, articulate rise and storyline. Who put that? How do you like that? We have Camtasia, but not everyone has it here. Is that something that all of your faculty have access to? I'm pretty sure it's fee-based, right? Starting to use Camtasia. I also see, is it Hella? What are some ways you could create strong rubrics for higher level courses using these tools? Is it possible to pair rubrics with these? So when you say pair rubrics with these, do you mean rubrics for your faculty to use to make sure that they're using them correctly? Or do you mean rubrics for grading student work? Probably grading student work, right? Evaluating student work. Okay. With the H5Ps, I have not seen a way that incorporates rubrics in it. It could be something that you use offline, but for the most part, the H5P activities are automatically graded, so it doesn't leave a lot of room for subjectivity, except for things like the essays and the Cornell notes and things like that. But the single choice set, the multiple choice answers, the branching scenarios, those are all going to be based on specific answers that students that are objective, right? Mostly things like the essays and notes. Yeah, so I know within Moodle we do have rubric grading, which is nice. So faculty can create a rubric or a grading guide, and then when students submit essays and things like that. So that is where I would say the mastery comes in, right? So the rubrics would be something that you would give the students to practice with, so that as they're doing it within the H5P, they're trying to meet those standards. And then when you set up the essay in H5P to give them some feedback, you would want to include those rubric aspects in it. But then when you're ready to do their evaluation on their mastery of it, that is when you would definitely grade by the rubric. And that would probably be submitted as an assignment. So Anita, you said, do you use Articulate, Storyline, and Rise for your e-learning trainings for the institution? Okay, yeah, I know our HR department wanted Camtasia for theirs. And then they just said, we just need you to create a video on copyright and fair use. And I know if anybody attended the previous presentation, gosh, why can't I remember their name, on fair use and copyright, it was great. And I would like our HR team to watch that. You don't just necessarily create a video. There's a lot of ifs, right? Mostly things. Okay, I think I got everybody's questions, and I'm loving these answers. Yuja, okay, Yuja does interactive videos too. I know I had a Yuja rep call me as well, and I passed them on to my senior supervisor. That's what I do with vendors, as much as I love them. Kahoot is fun. I've always had good feedback from Kahoot, and there's also one called WooClap, WOOCLAP, and those I've used mainly for synchronous sessions like this, rather than the asynchronous ones. Invite students to create something using a tool of their choosing. Yay, somebody pointed that out. That was going to be one of my points, is that we don't want to forget the tools that require students to engage and create content, right? Because that gets them learning. Nearpod. I've heard of Nearpod, but I haven't used it. Rise courses can be embedded in LMS as a SCORM, and you have quizzes. That is pretty nice. And back in the days of the early SCORMs, I had issues with responses getting stuck out in the void, I would say, because the students would say that they did it, but it never came back to the gradebook. Angela, I see you have your hand up. Do you want to unmute and ask a question?
Yes, thanks. I'm sitting here trying to take mad notes of all these fantastic suggestions that people are posting. And, you know, as much as of a fan as I am of all education and different ways to make it engaging and fabulous and all, my head spins with trying to know where to go to find all these things. And so like I'm like I said, I'm taking notes, but this is the dumb question that's coming out. Is there like a location that has all these options listed that you're like, oh, if I wanted to do something with a video voiceover, something, I can go and here are 10 choices I can choose from that's recommended or evidence-based or something. So besides just Googling endlessly trying to find the just right one, is there like a place that things like these are listed or captured or provided?
That is a great question. And that might be, I can look in all my notes because I too have kept frantic notes through all of the professional development and stuff that I've gone through, and have a huge repository of things that are all disjointed. So it would be nice to sort of centralize them. And I did save this as a screenshot, and hopefully we'll have access to the chat as well. Oh, and I guess we're down to 10 minutes in the presentation, but that's okay because we're almost done. So I'll see what I can come up with and hopefully put together. Oh, look, someone did share something. shropguide.net. Ooh, that does look like a great place. Okay, I'll be sure and share these follow-up resources with the QM team too, so that everybody can have access to it. Oh, and yes, that still happens. The SCORM stuff gets stuck out in the void. Darn it, that's the only bummer with that I found. Because I did use Captivate for a while too in my previous position, and I enjoyed Captivate because you can do those interactive quizzes and stuff like that in it as well. Yes, thank you, Kelly. I appreciate that resource. So I'm going to clear those drawings. I did take a screenshot and I can share it with everybody if you want to. So just to kind of cover the learning management system tools, one of the most common ways is a quiz, and that can be used to provide practice and let learners fail gracefully again so that they can get some feedback and make the changes that they need to be able to perform adequately. Many quiz tools will allow you to add specific feedback for certain questions or even certain responses within the questions. So based on how the student answers, they can get specific feedback that can point them to remediation. And that will help point them in the right direction and give them the chance to practice. Moodle has a lesson tool, which is really nice because it's a lot like that branching scenario in H5P. I have loved the lesson tool where I mentioned that the Agamotto H5P does not have anything for the students to actually answer. I've embedded it in a lesson question page and asked questions based on what the students were seeing in that Agamotto activity. So that got them engaging with the content more and actually thinking about what they were looking at, whether it was results from some kind of chemistry lab equipment or microscope slides. The glossary tool, this is one of those that allows the learners to do the work, right? To create the content and interact with the material. So the learners can collaborate on things like key terms or key acronyms, or you could even elevate it on Bloom's taxonomy with more in-depth entries on something like stock market trends or influences of the economy. And then all of the learners can benefit from that and print it. You can also have the learners submit their own multiple choice, true, false, and even essay questions and model responses. And then you can use those later in your summative assessments. And coming back to my goals for this presentation, I hope you feel like that you are now able to define instructional interactivity and identify some ways to add instructional interactivity into your online courses and promote active learning and support the specific review standards 5.2 and 6.2. Because it's not passive, it's cognitively engaging, but it always comes back to our student learning outcomes, right? So hopefully I've helped you see some different ways that you can add some instructional interactivity and active learning in your courses. And I see we have a few minutes left, so I just wanted to stop there and I can open it up to any questions that you may still have. And Anita shared something. Ooh, thank you, Anita. Oh, this is great. Yeah. Very nice. It looks like, have you used a lot of these, Anita? The lesson tool, Paula, I will say that's another one where it takes some planning, especially if you want to take advantage of the branching scenario option, because you have to know where you want the students to go. So the student can go anywhere based on whatever they answer. You can jump to any page, or you can just go in a linear fashion, which is, there's nothing wrong with that either, because you can present material and ask questions along the way. And hopefully it's not just questioning for questioning's sake. It's actually questions that are formulated at a higher level so that students are cognitively engaging. Anita said, time and again, you've used these tools. Oh, thank you, Jen. I hope so. Well, if we don't have any other questions, I know it's been a busy day and people may need the break. Goose chase, okay.